Sheila here with Sirius Dallas Moon. I'm going to have to do Israel's solar return chart because it's Independence Day for Israel. And 7 hours ago, all European unions are thinking to have sanctions on settlers or violent settlers in Judah and Shomron, except for Hungary. Um, and then Germany and Italy stopped the move of Spain against Israel. So there may be some sanctions. Not unexpected, because, of course, the move on Iran that was a focal point of sanctions um, does is kind of like it was kind of like a decentralizing Israel in the face of which power relation wise is understandable, um, and um, and again, will Israel use the strong card of diplomatic relations and the psychoerotic as sovereign instead of rapey? If it does, I believe it will have an unprecedented advantage that can be consolidated without sacrificing sovereignty. And in that sense, the sanctions on Israel are futile unless countries will begin to basically change the psychoerotic element of diplomatic relations and hidden intelligence trade relations to basically zero rape, zero slavery. Of course, when we talk about violation of children, but also in adults, it empowers the sexual and the erotic while maintaining sovereignty. We cannot ignore the erotic when we address politics. It's something that I began to very, um, very initially tend to while I was in academia, and and back then I wasn't thinking even in terms of sexual boundary violation, but more in the sense of um, in the sense of awareness of our energy. And this is why I was the first and only person to talk with my students when the dean was litigated, not in my case. And people were starving for somebody to speak about that, and everybody was so occupied with the juristic procedure when I was foreseeing the epistemic challenge in jurisdiction and in the inherent nature of the offenses that later I would learn is also occultistic. That targeted me so much that the person that was the victim was basically annihilating me as well, because they were so afraid. Um, I literally called the dean stalker on their page, and they were like, "Surely it's my boss. You can't just call him stalker." And I'm like, "If he can write in your post, then I can call him stalker." But I also addressed the violation as an intergenerational gap that is not being well received by the younger generation trying to culturally address the problem. Um, it was 2 meters from me being from me being the point of the popcorn. Um, beyond terrifying, but first of all, let's upload an episode. Shout out to Threads of Fate. Um, and yeah, my weird face. My let's record something not to lose the opportunity to have the right to use a Swedish island face. um, and how should I call the previous episode? How should I say that? Lilith? Anyway. Um, yeah, when Rao is with Lilith, it's kind of like there's gonna be a major Lilith. Um, what should I put there? If I put flowers, everybody will associate it with weird stuff. Venus is not Lilith. Just I'll just have to change the tab um, and schedule it because we've definitely been dealing with a lot of uploads. Now let's see Israel's natal chart or Israel's solar return. A little bit of a word, yes, going back to Lilith. Lilith eclipses, if I recount, let's say Aries, Lilith eclipses definitely put a major Lilith in the arena, in the mundane arena. I've had a little bit of the honor, and at the same time, Lilith is the one that would not be subjugated, even if it would mean being cast out of paradise. Thinking Paradise Island, and thinking about um, being uninvited to Epstein Island because you would not comply with the rites of passage might not be a bad thing, and that's exactly the mindset of Lilith. Now, with Ketu Leo and Lilith in Aquarius, it's also Lilith not complying with the more calmy sense of, yeah, you're going to be equal, but it's equal as trafficked. And there's something almost calming about these Lilith eclipses. After, if I think about the Lilith Aries eclipses, they were not simple in any way, shape, or form. But they definitely made a Peter ring drop. And what dropped with the Peter ring is the threat on the sovereignty of the European Union. Sovereignty, 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 sovereignty. Rape negates sovereignty. Um, the refusal of Lilith to participate in drop the petering. And the Lilith Pluto eclipses there are gonna bring pretty much the same. And when I say pretty much the same, I mean Lilith is the one who is reluctant to be subjugated even if she's cast out, but Lilith being cast out changes, it shifts the face of diplomacy. The fact that they couldn't pull up another Stormy Daniels, and they tried, without us, without people already saying, hey, is the First Lady being trafficked? And if she isn't, then it's not defamation to ponder if she was trafficked. That shift of atmosphere was the Lilith eclipse. And by the way, I'm really appreciative of Melania for really making it very obvious. And the stairway climb. Um, and this is where the the tone of the Lilith eclipses is looking completely different. It makes European Union way more sovereign, developing its own weapon industries, not having to acquiesce also to Israel so much, which causes an ego death in the Israeli diplomacy that is much needed. Ego death does not mean fall from grace, it means transformation, letting go of what is no longer valid. Now, Israel natal chart. Let's take a look at what is Israel going through. First of all, the Lilith eclipses are going to be Lilith return in the fifth house for Israel. Falcon, this is Epstein. Here's what we see here. Lilith fifth house is children. Saturn in Leo in the 11th is a community to do with children and leaders. Sun in the 8th house as hidden resource or hidden wealth that is also cultistic. The Rahu Lilith eclipse is there. Um, they are going to first of all, Israel is going to have Ketu in its entire 11th house, which means that the ego death in diplomatic relations is par excellence, 1-to-1, is Israel is scheduled to have a diplomatic ego that now it can definitely come out stronger with more allies, but also more authentic and less religious, which is, thanks God, thanks God. Those that were thinking to have, let's say, a king, they were probably not thinking to do that with Ketu going through Leo. I, I mean, I hope they were thinking to do that with Ketu going through Leo. They have to dematerialize the idea. um, by the way, Israel might be purging some of those Lilith, some of those Lilith themes of the woman that would not be subjugated can bring a certain ending. But those will not be with Venus in the 10th house. Those would, though, how should I say that? If they will assassinate her, they're gonna know. It's gonna be a diplomatic fail if they would assassinate her. I'm saying it outright. Aquarius favors transparency, and I believe that being transparent is a good strategic move. Um, this solar return, or this Independence Day, let's say, we're not exactly at the solar return. We're gonna be at the solar return um, actually towards the end of May. Um, but this Independence Day, let's say, I see the entire stellium in the 7th house, Uranus in the last degrees of the 8th house. So we're gonna end April with Uranus ingressing for good to the 9th house. The ingress of Sedna there got us the October War. The ingress of Uranus, I really don't remember. I think there was something with Iran, but this could also be attributed to the Saturn Neptune doing the back and forth in Aries, which is the 7th house. Definitely, polarization and civil war clock is associated with Uranus returns in Gemini. Um, the issue of women's rights was rising when Uranus was crossing Israel's sun, and is still on the rise. Um, the and this is also, well, Pluto in the 5th house, Rahu still in the 6th house, Ketu in the 12th. Israel is purging hidden enemies, but also hidden alliances. Um, Indeed, Rahu in the 6th house of Israel was the open enemy wars. Jupiter here with neighboring countries, some sort of religious war. And it definitely was during the time of the war with Iran. Chiron is about to finish with the seventh house of Israel and ingress into the eighth, which means that Israel is going to have to remediate its reliance on external funding and its reliance on passive income, which means that at the same time its weapon development industry is having a severe backlash as a direct result of the psychoerotic that does not honor the sovereign self, occultistic practice. The Lilith eclipses were at the seventh house of Israel, and the amount of times they tried to assassinate Benjamin Netanyahu, and again, um, particular, I've nothing against Benjamin Netanyahu. My idea of democracy is to vote for what I do want, um, or for what does represent me. And there are parties that will simply represent, let's say, women rights better. Um, Not saying that women rights is the entire elections, but this is exactly my point when I think about representation. So there were such tremendous occultistic trafficking rights trying to siphon energy to try to assassinate Netanyahu. Um, and they were only empowering him. It can be that that was the goal, but if and here is the drama. If that was the goal, it was is actually not working in his favor. If that was not the goal, it is working in his favor. Um, I may have identified certain things that are happening regarding maybe an alternative party that is supposed to represent women's rights, but how should I say that? It's too early for me to decide, and I'm waiting for Saturn to progress a little bit to assess the things correctly. Um, Chiron in the seventh house of Israel has been there since 2018, I think. Um, a lot of wars, a lot of internal conflicts. The Pfizer lab rat, um, a lot of issues around the identity of Israel, but also of its allies and enemies. The Qatar Gate can definitely be associated with that. Whatever we think about the Qatar Gate, it's kind of like expressing itself through this Aries and Chiron Aries. Um, the Chiron ingressing into the eighth house of Israel is not good news for those who are reliant on occultistic practices that violate the feminine to work. In fact, it's coming to curate just that. Now, this is why I say transparency is key because um, the transparency here can alleviate and remediate the damages. Is Israel going to go through sanctions with Cameron in the eighth house of Israel? In the beginning, absolutely yes. To the level of Iran, even. Why? Because there were ayatollahs in Israel. I'm not joking. When they started the war with Iran, I said Israel is and United States are gonna have to appease. If they're setting out to war and they say, oh, it's because they violate women's rights, they're gonna have to appease the parameter of women's rights. Israel can experience tremendous sanctions. It could actually work in favor of Lapid, but I'm not sure. I'm really waiting for Saturn to progress a little bit further so I can assess things. And if so, Yair Lapid's party will have to address ritual abuse and occultism by and large. I do think that with the crisis and the sanctions that it's going to cause, it's going to be almost the only way out. This is what I asked when I was kind of like really, um, really approached with the question of what do I think about Lapid. A lot of good things going for this party. Um, there are some rituals that are done um, with the letters Po, and those rituals are not good for Lapid. They're not good for Lapid. Um, and probably it's an attempt to disempower the party. And this is where, when it comes to such practices or occultistic practices, I'm always being very cautious because the way that they work with energy would be to bring a certain amount of energy and then channel it. So I don't know if they are bringing that amount of energy towards or in favor or not. And in any case, the occult aspect cannot be violent. I've began to work even when I do, for example, talismans. If I would melt wax, then I would write, let's say, do I don't know a, um, a jar of butter. I don't know. So I would melt wax, and with on the wax, I would inscribe rather than engrave. Um, and this is moving towards a non-violent form of occultism. The intent is very important. Um, and um, and this is where we see that the alchemy and transformation is it's a natural thing rather than a supernatural thing. Um, I do have Pluto in Scorpio in the ninth house. And so the alchemy and transformation is not by violent, because think about the eighth house. Conception is not supposed to be violent. Birthing is not a violent act. And again, it doesn't mean that birthing doesn't have growth pains or tremendous, okay, that's not, but it does mean that, how should I say that? the birthing is think about the inbreeding and the bringing of the orgasmic self to basically create a, an orgasmic birthing into the world. Again, not to take away, I know that these are the most tremendous pains and so on and so forth. Um, but I also think about the fact that certain occultistic practices that create tremendous violence in the world are making it more so violent than it is, or more so painful than it is. Um, Now, and it can translate to the policies that accommodate for the comfort of the doctors rather than the comfort of the birthing person, to the lack of, how should I say that, to the pressure that's put upon couples that do, let's say, IVF, and to the pressure on people to birth in general, that created tremendous upheavals. Um, Now, we how should I say, the women rights, when we talk about women rights, the rapey violence is not an occult practice that's compatible with women rights or with anything sovereign. So that's something to really and Uranus at the end of Taurus. Israel cannot escape the occultistic practices. There are huge conversations about ritual abuse. Um, there was the death of Shoshana Strouk, which was a daughter of a parliament member from the religious Zionist party, a woman, by the way. Um, and so this puts a lot of pressure on Lapid's party, which is really appeasing a lot of women rights um, legislation initiatives. So I do think this Chiron can bring sanctions, and those sanctions are going to do what Uranus didn't manage to do, Chiron is going to do. Um, and this is, I opened this with all countries but Hungary wanting to have sanctions on the settlements. And to be quite frank, we're gonna have, with Saturn, we're gonna have a Saturn return to 67, and there are other countries that have interests in the area, or interest that the area will be peaceful and not generate another post 67. First of all, the post 67 smugness generated 73, which generated the Ayatollah revolution, because it gave the legitimacy for the West to criticize Israel in ways that were unprecedented before, and the turnover into the Ayatollah regime, as Iran was the only one providing oil for Israel during the oil embargo. Um, and so Israel got another existential threat. Now they're talking about Turkey. Now, Turkey is indeed, let's just say, an overextended Turkey is already Ottoman Empire, which is a threat to Rome. Um, but will the Apostle Crusades unite hand in hand with the Judaic um, and the Judeo-Christian becomes the Spanish Inquisition very quickly. And I can say there was on BitChute I was joking and saying I am the secular what was it said the secular legislator that put down the Inquisition because it was too cruel. Well, my job is way easier done abolishing any threats of Inquisition when there is no ritual abuse within the Jews. Oh, wait, and the Christians. Muslims and so on. First Nations, First Nations. Um, Definitely Ketu going through Leo means that the allies or alliances of Israel, let's just say we are dematerializing now. It's not necessarily bad at all because we could be dematerializing also our negative reputation. And this is and by the way, Israel dealing with the challenge of the ritually abused children bravely and authentically can dematerialize the bad reputations that it has. And it will be forced to reckon with tremendous Lilithian powers. If I think about the Lilith eclipses of Aries, they were the, how should I say that? They were the introduction to the Epstein files. And they set the tone in such a way that the war against Iran was way more difficult. We couldn't cooperate with the Kurdistani people. If there were no Peter Rings affiliated with Israel, we would have no problems having an operation with Kurdistan. Actually, one of the greatest contributions was the work with the Zoroastrians, and I personally know the researcher that did the superb essay on the Zoroastrian religion in Iran. And indeed, strengthening the Zoroastrians was one of the greatest moves of Israel. And not only that, deciding that it's not returning to a monarchy but to a constitutional democracy or something like that. That was something that was actually well thought after and could have been quite successful, except that the Peter Rings were standing in the way of having a strategy. It's not that we didn't have strategy, but they were getting in the way of a winning strategy. And the achievements were not And not only that, it also prevented actually tending to whatever is happening with Hamas, and created tremendous fiascos in Lebanon. 11/11. Um, so again, this ego that any Ketu Leo brings. And we're also addressing that at the time where the Sun is applying to square Pluto, which is an ego death. Dematerializing the egoic persona, the how should I say that, the darker aspects of Leo, the darker aspects of pride. It's kind of like when does pride turns to smugness, and when Israel dematerializes that, it can come out way more authentic and have win-wins. Now, the entire world requires an unprecedented level of accommodating to Lilith. And by the way, by 2030, we're pretty much done with that. 2030, we're going to have Lilith in Gemini um, with Ketu. So, and here's the thing about Lilith. Lilith is the woman that will not be subjugated, but once we're done accommodating for the woman that is sovereign, we can dematerialize the Lilithesque aspect of um, the exiled woman, and actually embody the Venusian. We can actually relax into our feminine, and indeed we're going to have Ra with Venus and Jupiter and Mars. Think about also of our natal charts. Um, when we've accommodated to the women in our lives that would not downgrade themselves, that would not subjugate themselves to anyone or anything for any paradise, we can relax into the cooperative woman, the woman that can trust that her partner is working from a win-win perspective. Um, and so Israel is not alone in the need to go through. The entire world goes through this ego death. It's just that it happens in the 11th house. And Ketu will be going over Mars, which means the military smugness. Saturn, that means the rulers and leaders that are more traditional. And Pluto, that is the occult, and I dare say also the intelligence. And then, of course, the moon, which is the people. And so in Israel, also the people go through an ego death. If I think about the soldiers that came back from the Israel-Palestine war and said, wait, I also raped, am I like Hamas? Knowing that their healing, their way out of PTSD would be to basically liberate themselves from rapey patterns. That's the truth. That's how to curate the And then they will have to address the Zoom wars or the things that what made them rape. Secret societies, brotherhoods. Then we be young children and soldiers being raped at hospitals. Sedna is already in ninth house of Israel, where Israel does experience what seems like treason. It's kind of like it's allied with United States and then United States. Also now for NATO, it's in the 10th house. It's kind of like United States was like a tsunami. It withdrew its forces. Then it just said, "Okay, we're on a war with Iran, and oh, by the way, we took Greenland, and yeah, Venezuela. I mean Venezuela. I mean, um, but they do nothing. They do some military basements in Iraq, and I mean, like, well, this is what Article 5 is for. But like, also notifying in advance." Now Trump knows this. And from his perspective, he can say, "Well, we will remember that if Europe will need us, and so on and so forth." Splendid isolation was also in the previous war. It ended with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is true. Um, People living around Pearl Harbor, said the girl broadcasting from Israel. And so for Israel, Sedna in the ninth house is United States getting its own interests in Iran, and and the possibility that it was just withdraw. Europe not liking its soldiers being shot when there are technologies that are so precise that NATO, by the way, purchased. And Hokkaido is a combination of sushi and combined. And so Sedna is definitely Sedna in Israel's ninth house, which is, by the way, my fourth house. And now Uranus ingressing to meet Sedna. How should I say that? Love, I talk a lot about the fact that sexual boundary violation harms the intelligence and so on and so forth. That being said, the timelines of those lower astrals, Uranus Sedna comes to liberate us from those timelines. But to liberate us from those timelines, we would need to abolish the human trafficking, occult Epstein practices that are around that, while Israel will be severely sanctioned. And here is the drama. Rape-based diplomacy gaat kapot. This is what the war is about. The war was created from occultistic rape of infants. Occultistic rape of infants, or any rape or any occult practices that violate sexual boundaries, is not compatible. Jupiter in the 10th house of Israel, slowly approaching Procyon. Peace and reconciliation is not possible with occultistic rape practices. And it costs Israel, Israel is under sanctions because of that. No, seriously, what did we need how, to kill people that from Italy and France? If the technology exists to prevent that. And have more and more settlements where everybody knows it's Saturn returned to 67 in 2 3 years. Military strategy doesn't go without the chart. It's not my invention. It's a convention. Um, and the Lilithesque eclipses are still, they're bringing sovereignty through the ego death of the psychoerotic cannot be rapey anymore. Israeli intelligence was being litigated for sexual boundary violation. This is, but we are also moving forward too. What is the biggest power for Israel is Beta per se. Beta per se can only be appeased when there is no occultistic rape and no rape. And where the victims and survivors are being supported and recognized in recovery, in full recovery. Doesn't go with the use of psychiatry as a punitive or threatening or torturous, doesn't go with the type of occult intelligence that molds people into a personality, doesn't even go with melting pot. I have a lot of family on Better Per Se. Doesn't go with messianic type of trajectories. And I know it's difficult because Neptune is in Aries, which is kind of like second coming of Christ and so on and so forth. But for Israel's actual hidden assets, this type of Messiah thing is no good. It's people being tortured, trafficked, and being forcibly made religions. Um, is there a risk of a bomb being dropped on Israel? Well, first of all, Aries and Pluto don't agree yet, which means an A bomb. This it's already an aspect that does not support the dropping of an A bomb. Um, in fact, Pluto coming to slowly close a cycle with Aries can even mean denucleafication. Denucleafication. Denucleafication goes together with abolishing any type of ritual abuse. Um, Pluto in fifth house, ruler Saturn in activating ruler Saturn in Leo. Um, and here is the drama. Ketu going on Saturn and Pluto can be some sort of denucleafication. How, I don't know. Aries has tried this Pluto before the foundation of Israel. Which was Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So, what sort of dematerialization of atomic will Israel drop an A bomb? To be very honest, if I take a look at only the natal chart, Pluto is applying to oppose Pluto, but if I take a look at only the natal chart, Pluto A bomb is ruled by Sun in the 8th house, which means a hidden asset, which ruler is in the 10th house, famous for hidden asset. By the way, the textile factory can also be delineated. Sun in Venus. Venus is textile. This is the famous textile factory saying. Um, and so Venus in the 10th house, Moon in Leo, that could actually be Israel dropping an A bomb on itself. and there was Some people were thinking that that could be a possibility, that if Israel is going to go down, it's just going to nuke itself and take the world with it or something.